Okay, what's up? Silas here.
Steven Kirschner. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, so we were going to continue our food series. We did this series where it was You Are What You Consume, which I've switched the name to You Are What You Consume instead of You Are What You Eat. Because Steven and I are both interested in food and prep and cooking, and I was thinking about that idiom, You Are What You Eat. And that makes a lot of sense, but also you are what you consume in the sense that you are what you consume food wise, mentally wise, and that builds up who you are as a person and also builds up your cultures.
I agree.
Yeah. So the next one we're going to do is going to be discussing the French Laundry, which is what?
So it's the top, I don't know if it still is, but it has been the top restaurant in the United States. It's run by Thomas Keller. He's considered by a lot of people to be the best chef in the U.S. He's the only American chef that has 3 Michelin-starred restaurants. He has French Laundry as well as Per Se in New York. Only American to achieve that. It's really, I mean, even getting 1 Michelin star is great, but I mean, to get 2 restaurants that each have 3 stars, that's really something.
Okay, explain the Michelin star.
So Michelin it's based on the Michelin Traveled Guide. It started in France. I'm trying to think if it was 100 or more years ago. The Michelin Man, you see, that's the same company. They basically wanted to write up a recommendation of restaurants for people who traveled around. And originally, of course, it started in France, but they worked their way out from there, different European countries, and finally the U.S. Now, Michelin, it doesn't exist in every city. It's mostly the major cities like New York, Vegas. In Europe, it's London. I know in Austria, it's like only Vienna, places like that. But the idea is that it goes 1 through 3 stars, 1, of course, being low, 3 being the highest. Even getting 1 star is a big deal. Like last I checked, I think in the city there are 60 or 70 something restaurants that have 1 star. And when you consider that, I think there are like 20,000 restaurants in the city or something. So you consider 50 or 60 out of that, like that's really outstanding. Yeah. And then as far as 3 Michelin stars, I think there's like 5 or 6 in the city.
Okay, so when it comes to this, if you're saying it's in a limited area, how do they select the areas? Because people will wonder, and I think this comes up in a lot of situations where you see ratings for something. This comes up a lot when people say, oh, American football, like if you guys know the NFL, the National Football League, has world champions in the Super Bowl. They have this massive thing where they say, okay, these are the world champions. And then I used to be one of those people who used to be like, oh, what do they mean world champions? Or like NBA, like, what do they mean world champions?
Yeah.
Well, there's no better basketball teams. I know people argue that there's no other teams. It's not like the New York Yankees, if they win, I don't know who won last year. The Chicago Cubs. Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, that's right. That was a big deal. Yeah.
And they were the World Series. It's a World Series. That's what they call them. But people argue that, oh, there's leagues in South America, there's leagues in Japan. They don't play those people. I'm like, I think they would still win.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the Michelin star, and then when it comes to other things in life, how do we get to the point where we think, okay, that ranking is agreed to be the top ranking in the world, even though it gets to the point where it's almost impossible to get to the point where you're actually comparing all the restaurants in the world, all the locations? How do they get to the point where they say, okay, if we pick these cities, we will be able to find the best restaurants?
Well, just because I think part of it's the sheer number. I mean, you go to like where I grew up, you have a diner, you have 1 moderate restaurant, you have a cafe and 1 or 2 other things. But of course, you go here, you have everything from super high end, and then you have chain restaurants, you have fast food, and then everything in between. I mean, even, for example, with me with sushi, it's like the place I work at, Neta, it's like higher end, but then you go to somewhere like Masa, that's even higher end. Their tasting menu, I think, is like $600 or something now. Wow. So, but because you have that range, I think they can be more selective. Okay, who falls into our criteria? Whereas you go to a small town like I'm from, I think, maybe within a 20-mile radius of where I grew up, there were probably like 3 sushi places, and they're all like kind of on the cheaper side.
Yeah.
So there isn't that competition where you can really distinguish where do they fall on the spectrum.
And what do you think attracts people to get to that higher level of saying, okay, we're going to go? Because our next video is going to be the French Laundry. We mentioned this in the previous video. And for this next video, we're going to try to watch that video and kind of pause and discuss and dissect what we're seeing in there. But what do you think gets somebody to think of going to, is it haute cuisine or what's it called?
Haute cuisine, yeah, high, yeah.
The high end, instead of just being like, I'm just going to have some sloppy joes. I'm sure there's like at this place, if you order a sloppy joe there, they might have a sloppy joe that's like made out of like Kobe beef and
brioche,
some special kind of tomato that only grows in some hill in some random town in Italy for like 3 months out of the year. And so there's ways to make even the most basic thing to be to that high level. What do you think inspires people to take it to that level versus just here's this?
Well, I think it depends what you're aiming for. I mean, a lot of people have this misconception that high-end restaurants make a lot of money. The thing is, they don't. Like a lot of you make more money if you open a diner than if you open Danielle or Per Se. But the reason those chefs open those restaurants is because they have a certain vision they want to fulfill. They want to have a tasting menu with all these items. They want to have a certain level of creativity. They want to get exclusive items. Now, what a lot of chefs do, and I know Danielle Boulud and Thomas Keller both did this, is they opened restaurants like the French Laundry, like Danielle, and then once they put their name out there, they started opening up lower end places with their name still on it. And once they had that, because they had built that reputation, anything with their name on it sold. Like we put on the first video, there was that pate from Bar Boulud where I used to work, and that's one of his more casual places. And that place is a real money maker. I mean, charcuterie is low food costs. They do high volume, like 600 covers on a busy night. I mean, so because of that, it's like, but because he established himself with Danielle, it's, now he's going to open a more casual place. Let's eat there. We can afford that. And then you make that money through volume. But because you've established yourself at that quality, you can build on that. Whereas it's interesting because David Chang, he's a famous Korean chef. He owns the Momofuku restaurants. What he did, he actually did the opposite. He opened noodle bars, sambar, all that. And then he opened Momofuku Co., which is the high-end place, but it only has like 15 seats or something. He actually did the reverse. But I think it's building that reputation for yourself to a point where, okay, you can start putting your name on things and people are going to buy it because of that. Like with celebrities, like with anything else.
Oddly enough, I mean, not oddly enough, because it gets to the point where I think if you know enough information and you're talking about certain topics, you find that you're putting yourself around similar-minded people or people who kind of can discuss similar things. Because that Momofuku thing, I was going to ask about that because there'd been this thing I kept hearing about the Momofuku crack pie. There's this certain pie that they have at the noodle bars. I finally went and got one, and I was somewhat underwhelmed. Now, it was this it was somewhat underwhelming experience, but you go in and it's kind of I don't want to say hip. Like, hip is thinking like too old of a term, but it's
trendy.
Yeah, it's like a trendy thing that people in there like listening to hip hop or some kind of like drum and bass type music.
Well, we play 90s hip hop at Neta. Actually, that's our soundtrack.
Cool. So these guys, they were kind of like that. They give you this thing. It just comes in this plastic bag, and it's just this kind of small little pie. And I mean, it was really tasty. It was really
good,
sugary,
but it
wasn't like talked up because people are like, people come from all over the place. I was having the pie sitting outside and seeing people like, is this the place? Is that the place? So there's something that goes into that, as you were saying. Somebody gets a name by doing something of quality, and then they go on to something else and they carry that name. And you see that happening in many forms, especially when it comes to information, whatever we're taking in. There's something that we know. Part of the reason cuisines and things like that get developed around cultures is because this is what your mom cooked. This is the foods that you ate when you were growing up. So you just kind of have a connection to that, and it's a safe bet. Now, when it comes to media, when it comes to information, we're seeing this happening a lot with news sources now. News sources are switching from the old system of developing news to like alternate forms of developing news. But there's a name that these companies have that is still going on. There's names that are still going on, like, I'll just name drop the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the Fox Newses, these massive companies that have been known for, this is the kind of news we get, this is where we go. They're now trying to switch to a new form of getting information out. How much do you think that plays into a part with a comparison of translating the way something works in one restaurant to a different kind of restaurant, the way a certain food works in your mother's kitchen to making it for a large amount of people?
It's interesting you bring this up because I don't know. Did you see the movie Ratatouille, the Disney movie?
No, I did not see that.
Well, the reason I bring this up is that Thomas Keller was actually a consultant for that movie, and I think he actually did one of the voices as well. But the kitchen was inspired in part by the French Laundry kitchen, the brigade system, where you have you have executive chef, sous chef, tournant, saucier, all those different ranks. It's a brigade system. It's kind of based off a military system in a way. Like you think of a squad, like, okay, you have a medic, you have the grenadier, you have all that. And what's interesting is that, of course, the movie gets its name from the French dish ratatouille, which is typically a peasant dish. I forget which region in France. I think it's more south. But
Damn peasants.
but
Like that word.
it's interesting because one of the things they do in the movie, and this is actually a theme in Keller's cooking, is they take Ratatouille and they make a higher end version of it. So it's taking the general principle but finding a way to create it so it's more expressive, it's more creative, more colorful, maybe add some different flavors and so on. And there's a scene where they show the food critic in the movie. He's eating it, and it brings back memories of when he was a kid eating Ratatouille in his mom's house. But at the same time, it's cool because it's like experiencing that memory, but in a new way. If that makes sense. And that's the theme in Keller's cooking. Like for example, we can go over it. I actually have the French Laundry cookbook right here. But it's a little beaten up at the moment. But
it's used. That's good.
But
you actually use something that you buy. A lot of people will buy this kind of book and they'll just put it on the shelf just because it's like, oh, I have the French Laundry book. But yeah.
But I was gonna say, like for example, a lot of the dishes that he has, like for example, there's carrots and peas, and of course that's a cliche. Okay, you think of like the frozen food section at the store, but then he does a carrot. What he does a pea ravioli with like a carrot puree, or he does surf and turf, but he reinvents that in different ways. Like I think in the book it's monkfish and lobster. And he has, he'll do like scallops and foie gras, like some, more creative way. Trying to think of some other dishes off the top of my head, but that's his overall theme. He's big on taking those older dishes and reinventing them, so it brings back the memory, especially either to people when they were kids or to the older generation of chefs. But it's wow, this is experiencing it in a new way, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing that you get. Now, you have certain places where they have that, and then you have, I don't know if it's coming back in style, but think of companies like Five Guys, which was one of my favorite fast food type, I guess, medium food. I know they're really fast at what they do, I guess. So, does it count as fast food? It's a burger place. So they pretty much. I watched this. I'll leave a link in the low bar to that too. There was a podcast I watched how they made this, and it was somebody was interviewing the person who created Five Guys. And talking about how all they do is pretty much burgers. They were just doing cheeseburgers. That's what they're doing to begin with. And they finally added hot dogs. He was finally convinced to add milkshakes. But what is the difference with a company that decides, okay, we're just going to do this. We're just going to do burgers. We're just going to focus on this. Versus now you have a different restaurants where they're like, okay, we're going to diversify. You look at the McDonald's menu, almost constantly changing. They have their main things in there, but they're constantly changing. Then you go to a French Laundry place. I know some people really insulted that I'm mentioning McDonald's and French Laundry in the same sentence.
Sure, yeah.
But you go to that experience and it's a different meal every day. So I'm trying to wonder, how is that also with the access to media that we have now? Some people would rather just go to a source and they're like, no matter what, as long as these people are telling me the story in a certain way, packaging certain information to me, that's what I'm happy with. Some people want to kind of have different new information coming in from the old sources. What do you think the relationship is with that?
I think I may have mentioned this in a previous video, but I think a lot of it is that people are afraid to get out of their comfort zone. They become comfortable. Okay, I know I can go here. I know I can get it. It's going to taste the same and so on. Mm-hmm. And I also mentioned in my family, like I'm one of the more adventurous eaters. Like I'll love trying new things. It doesn't mean I'll always enjoy it, but at least I can say, okay, I tried it. If I like it, I'll get it again. If not, do something else. But I think there are people who might say, oh, I'm afraid to go and spend this amount of money because if it's disappointing, wow, I've thrown all that money down the drain. Whereas if I go to McDonald's, I can go to Thailand and I know it's going to taste exactly the same.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. So again, I think it's part of that fear of getting out of your comfort zone. Again, if you have the money to burn versus, okay, is this a special occasion? For example, actually, I knew this girl from England, her boyfriend had this corporate card and they went to Masa where they put it on the card and she said Masa was disappointing. But I'm thinking to myself, you're spending $600 a person on sushi and that's disappointing. And the thing is, and again, I haven't been there in fairness to them. I don't know. She may have had been there on a bad night or something, but it's just to think you spend all that money to be let down. I mean, it's just, and if you can barely afford that or you can't afford that, it's like, why are you going to bother? I think that's part of it. Cost benefit analysis, yeah.
So next video, if you guys want, there's going to be a link in the low bar to the French Laundry video. I suggest you guys can watch it then, because when we watch it, we're not going to watch the entire thing. There's an entire prep of them actually going to the restaurant. We're going to focus on the part where they're actually eating and kind of just have the discussion around that. And again, my main... Excuse that, there's a bike driving by. My main idea behind this is you are what you consume. So we want to hopefully discuss different ways that you're enriched by both physical food and mental food. Yeah. So, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Look forward to doing the next one.
Yeah. Okay. So, links in the low bar. Watch the French Laundry thing. If not, we'll be watching clips of it in the next video. And thanks.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye. Okay.